All right. So today we have a great guest and a great topic. As many of you have probably noticed on this podcast, I've been kind of jokingly uh, remarking that last year the word of the year was co-pilots, and this year the word of the year is agents. So, what better way to celebrate the Year of Agents with our guest here, Joao Moura, who is the founder of crewAI, which you can find at crewai.io. So if you go to their website, right on the homepage, so here's what you can read: AI agents for real use cases. Most AI agent frameworks are complex. We provide the power with simplicity. We provide a platform and hope you create wonders. And so, with that long winded introduction, Joe, welcome to the Data Exchange Podcast.
Nice, nice. Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, I'm super happy to be doing this. And yes, I agree. Agents is the hot topic. Everyone's talking about it.
All right, so let's start with some baseline information for people who don't follow the space. So first of all, the notion of an agent, right? So maybe agents traditionally, Joe, are these are systems that are capable of performing complex goals or tasks with limited supervision. But maybe what is your guys' formal definition of agent? So what's the distinction between agent and co-pilot, for example?
Yeah, that's a common question. So the way that I think about it is most people are familiar with ChatGPT. So you go in ChatGPT and you basically have a conversation. So you ask it for something, the first version is not that great, but you keep giving it feedback up to the point that it gets better. So an agent is born at the moment that you leave that equation. So you stop being a blocker, and the LLM can basically either talk with itself or talk with another LLM, and then at that point an agent's born, because then it can alone self-critique and kind of like do whatever you want. And then on top of that, you can put other things, right? There's tools and memory and all that, and we can talk about other topics, but that's my definition of agents, is LLMs that can perform things autonomously.
And so this is a key distinction because, as some listeners may know, agents is an old term in computer science, but now agents have kind of been rejuvenated with the increasing capability of LLMs, right? So it sounds like Joe, you folks are focused on agents that are fundamentally backed by LLMs.
Exactly. And I mean, if I think it sometimes is easier for people to grasp the concept if you just forget the word AI agents for a second. I think we're talking about automations. It's automations 2.0. And if you think about it, it's basically automations with two new features, but these two features make a huge difference. The first one is the ability to generate content. So write the email, write the copy, all the things that we are used to. The second piece is because these LLMs have an understanding of language, they kind of have have a cognition. So they can choose between left and right, up and down, and that adds another layer to automations. So you can do automations that you were never able to do before, because now you don't need to have clear heuristics and clear conditions. It can be fuzzy. And our words is fuzzy. We're just a bunch of atoms mashed together. So it kind of like works pretty well with that.
So in this space, I think people kind of also delineate between single agent architecture. So this is an agent that does a task or performs a goal independently, and then the multi-agent architecture where you may have multiple agents working collaboratively. So in the case of Crew is specifically, are you folks focused on single agent or multi-agent or both?
We do both. The focus is multi-agents, but we do both. If you want to do one agent, that's okay as well. I think that also like the idea of like having one agent is a lot of like it's also like a packaging like factor, right? You can have multiple agents behind the scenes, and then you just wrap it in a way and you say like, hey, it's one agent. But then like you have like multiple LLMs and multiple agents kind of like trying to actually accomplish what they're trying to do. So I think there's the packaging, but then internally you can have one agent or you can have multiple agents. It's up to you.
So the other dimension that I want to kind of surface is modality, right? So there's agents that function at the level of text only, and then there's agents that are much more multimodal, maybe can generate images, can do other things. So uh, for Crew, again, what's your focus?
For
Or what
crew
can
right
you
now,
do?
it's
What can you do?
yeah.
Yeah.
For crew right now, it's text only. We are working on bringing multimodal, and honestly, that's very interesting because there are so many other use cases that it unlocks. So we are working on adding that. But I gotta say, we keep finding ourselves with our hands full with text only. There's like so much that you can automate already. And even though I think multimodal, it's gonna probably be like another big trending topic throughout the year. I think like people are still like trying to figure out how to make good use of that, while text is a little bit more straightforward, in my opinion, right now.
And obviously, there's also the environment where the agent operates. So there's kind of the physical environment. So now maybe we're talking more like robots, but then there's virtual environments and online. So I'm assuming Crew is mostly on the online and
Crew,
virtual.
yeah, Crew is it's online. Yeah, you can basically do anything. It's like it's on computer. It's like a bits and bytes only. The good thing is that Crew allows you to run like on any LLM. So it's actually LLM agnostic. So you can have we call a crew, basically a group of agents, where one agent might be running on GPT-4, another agent might be running on like an anthropic model, another one might be running on like a local model, and maybe another one is a fine-tuned model, and you can have those agents collaborate and work on things together. And honestly, I found that very interesting because if anything, it adds an extra layer of customability that you don't see very much out there.
And okay, so with kind of that basic terminology out of the way, let's drill down for our listeners who might be either interested or already kind of in the early phases of building these agents. So first of all, what makes a good use case for an agent solution? So I assume there's some kind of basic level of requirements in the sense that, first of all, does this task have enough scale to justify automation? Secondly, do I have the data to actually kind of create an automation solution, right? So, but I'll defer to you. So, what makes a good use case for an agentic solution?
Honestly, there's so many use cases, and that's kind of like a double-edged sword
Yeah.
because we are getting like a lot of traction now, especially on the enterprise side, where we get like 400 companies a week signing up and saying like, hey, we want to use your paid solution and this is our use case. So we have a very like good understanding on what people are trying to do, and it's very much a long tail. So you have a few very common use cases, and then you have a long tail of a lot of custom ones. So the most common ones are usually around researching, enrichment, and reporting. Those are usually the most common ones, and they apply to different verticals. So you might be doing like marketing research. So research products, research competitors, and then try to put together a report, a plan, or a copy for a campaign. And then you kind of like have like a campaign ready. Same thing for sales. You have a lead, you might do research on the lead, get the information, qualify it, score it, make a report, figure out talking points, and then like you have a report on that. So I think this cycle of like research, report, aggregate data, that has been like working super well. But you got the nail in the head.
Yeah, there. So, what are some of the uh, things that tip over to an agent solution? In other words, everything you described, I can do manually, right? So,
Yes.
at what point do I say, okay, I want this automated?
Well, at the point that starts saving hours, I think that's the biggest thing. And this is where like it becomes a no-brainer for a lot of the companies that we talk with. Once that we find that a use case that saved them like every time that I run these agents, I save an hour or 2 hours, then it becomes a no-brainer because they would be paying like a junior employee at least 25 bucks an hour to do it. And if they get to run this enough times, the numbers pile up pretty fast to the point that sometimes these big companies, we did some of the math with them, they'll be saving like $500,000 on a month, depending on how often they get to execute these automations.
So all right. So now I have identified the use case. So how do I get started? So what are some of the basic things I need to have in place to uh, get started on the workflow?
Yeah. I would say first thing it is to understand the problem, right? I would say before you try to automate it, you really need to like map it out. So you really understand like what is the process? What are the steps? Where information is coming from? What are the templates that I want it to abide with? So once that you have mapped that out, you have a good start. Then, if you're deciding to use Crew, you basically need the help from like your engineering team. So, you're gonna need someone in your engineering team to kind of like start to play with crewAI. And I would advise these people to start looking at docs and also examples. We have been fortunate enough that we have a big community. So if you go on YouTube and search crewAI, for example, I'm flattered with the amount of examples and tutorials and everything that you'll find. So I would say once that you map the process, you can give it to an engineer, you put them on the right track, and they're going to figure out how to implement it. And we take very pride to make it super simple on kind of like getting those like proof of concepts out of the ground.
So in terms of I mapped out the problem and the data sources. So from a software developer point of view, so what are the things that I need? So in other words, Joe, I guess so I know that I need to use an LLM, right? So do I need to provide the LLM with examples?
So what you would need to do is first think about the agents and then the tasks.
Mhm.
So my advice and my mental model for people doing it is to think like a manager. We found there's a very good correlation between good managers and people that create good proofs, multiple agents, just because they understand like who I'm hiring for doing this, and then two, a clear description of what I expect to come out of this. So I would say you need to think like, what are the agents? Who would be the people that I would hire to build this? And then what are the tasks? What I expect to get out from like each of them. And that's like how you're going to use Crew. Crew works around agents and tasks. But even if you're using other frameworks out there, you still want to think about things that way. Like what would be the people that I would hire? What would be the tasks and what I expect to get out of from them? And then, yes, you're right. If you have like external data sources, might be vector databases, might be regular databases, might be documents, PDFs, whatever you need to interact with, you also need to collect those so that you can interact with them.
So I haven't tried Crew, but when I look at the code, sample code, it seems quite, I mean, it's not difficult, I guess, right?
Yes.
To lay out these tasks and other elements that you need to build an agent, or am I wrong? So in other words, you can imagine, Joe, at some point, a manager, if there's enough Crew code out there, a manager might even be able to use Crew in a no-code way.
Yes, we actually had a lot of people doing it.
Yeah.
So when I built Crew, I brought a lot of my experience from Ruby and also from Rails. So Ruby and Rails are known for like be very like borderline magical. They're easy to write to the point that it's almost like playing English.
A lot
And I
of
wanted to bring
templates, a lot of
a lot of
templates.
templates,
Yeah.
exactly. So I brought some of that to crewAI. So as you can see, that come across as like, oh, it's super simple. If I want to create an agent, I just type agent. If I want to create a task, I just type task. So it reads like plain English. And we have a bunch of people that are like, no, like they have never programmed before, and they created automations they're now selling and making money on. Like we have multiple cases of that in the community, and I'm blown away for it. But we're also working on a UI, so people are going to be able to use a UI to build these agents if they don't want to even like look at the code.
So who is the as far as building the Crew agents themselves? So right now, who are some of the main cohorts? Are they data scientists? Are they web developers? Are they software engineers? So how would you characterize your user base?
Right now, if you think about like our business model, because we have the open source framework, that works as a distribution channel. So basically, a lot of how we get in touch with these companies is through software engineers. Software engineers that are playing with this and they're kind of like doing it. So there's some data scientists in there, but mostly software engineers, people that are actually trying to understand how I can bring these agents into my regular day-to-day apps and make it better.
So, uh, as far as your user base, as best you can tell, and this might, I don't know if you guys are gathering metrics or anything, but to what extent are people using open models versus the proprietary models from OpenAI, Claude, and Gemini?
So we are gathering metrics. We have telemetry on all of that.
Yeah,
It's all anonymous, so we don't
yeah.
know necessarily like who is doing what, but we have a very strong grip on like what people are trying to build. And I think that there's no one else out there that has this understanding that we do. For example, right now, there's no like one single day that comes by, even weekends, that we don't get at least 80,000 crews executed. So we basically like know like what models are people using, what like what are the agents that they're trying to create, what tools they're trying to integrate with. So we don't know the actual data that they're using in their prompts or anything, but like we can infer a lot about the use cases and what's working and what's not. So I'm just pulling up the LLM provider here to tell you like who is using what. Uh, OpenAI and Ollama are up in the top. We have Azure, Grok, Anthropic, Google, and Argo.
But you can't
Those are the
tell,
top
can
10.
you tell if someone is using open model on-prem?
Yes, I think I can. Let me just reload
So
this.
it sounds like that's not as common as using some of these APIs that the
I
providers.
gotta say, we do like Ollama that is like basically running like
Oh yeah, Olam. Yeah,
local
yeah.
model. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's in the top 10. So we have a bunch of people using it.
And can you tell if people are using Crew with models that have been fine-tuned?
I can, but that would be hard for me to pull right now.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But that's happening.
That is happening. Yeah, we use it ourselves.
What about Crew in conjunction with a retrieval augmented generation system?
Oh yeah, that's a lot. That's
Yeah.
like all of the use cases have an element of that. We use it all the time. We're doing a lot of dog fooding. We use Crew to build Crew a lot, and a lot of our use cases have RAG.
So, all right. So, um, when you fine tune a model or when you build a RAG system, I guess this is true, Joe, across the board for generative AI in general. It's the question of when do I deploy? When is it good enough, right? So in the case of agentic AI, I guess there's no substitute for trying the system and telling if it works, right? So, but at some point, you must have you must provide guidance for your users to say, hey, your agent is good enough to deploy. Now, the question of what good enough is, am I comparing it with the human person or what? So what are some of the evaluation metrics that you suggest to people?
100%. And I think like people need to understand that these are different kind of apps, right? We
Yeah.
have regular apps, and if you think about our regular apps in the past, like they're very strong typed, so strong type inputs, like you know what you're coming into the system, like very strict rules, you know like what's like the heuristics and everything, and a strong typed output, so you know you're getting out. If you think about it, this wave of AI applications, that's the opposite. You have fuzzy inputs, so you don't know what you're getting. You have fuzzy heuristics, things might go different ways, and you have fuzzy outputs. So I think like when you delineate that way, you're gonna find yourself realizing that some apps are gonna be better for some things, and some are gonna be better for others, and how you evaluate them has to be different. So for crewAI, for example, what we do whenever we're going to launch a new version of Crew, we run benchmarks internally. And that means that we run around 150 multi-agent systems, and we compare the results with the previous version with the new version. And how do we compare? Well, there's some hard metrics like how long it took to run, how many prompt tokens, how many completion tokens. So that's part of it. But then the other part is analyzing the output. And fun enough, we use Crew to do that. So you have a crew that'll look at the both crews' outputs and compare and giving them a score. And kind of like we use that to normalize a little bit on like, oh, is this getting better? Is it getting worse? And what that looks like. So again, I think like for fuzzy applications, like fuzzy applications that are AI applications nowadays, you will need some fuzzy analysis, I guess.
Yeah, so I guess uh, this goes to the broader question is of what is software engineering and what is the software development life cycle in the world of agents, right? So what is the equivalent of unit testing, integration testing, those kinds of things. So are you guys starting to form some best practices or even develop some tooling or to help people formalize some of these heuristics?
So we're doing a lot internally. We haven't open sourced it yet, but we probably will because we are finding ourselves like struggling with our like own multi-agent systems on testing, right? You want to make sure that you test it over time. What we do offer is with crewAI Plus, we basically allow people that are deploying on us to have access to a lot of these metrics. So they're visible and people can compare and people can see like over time how the quality has been up and down and all of it. But I still think that there should be a way for people to test those things locally. So yeah, we are working on some stuff. It's just not open source yet.
So I alluded to a couple of challenges. One is evaluation. The other one is testing. So what are some of the other challenges that people need to know about as when they're going down the road of agentic AI?
I would say that models, depending on the models that you're using, you might have severe limitations. So I think like a lot of people think about, hey, I'm gonna be able to automate this with like zero cost because I'm gonna use this local model. But depending on the model that you choose, you might find yourself like struggling. Honestly, smaller models specifically, we have done a bunch of work to support smaller models the best that we can, to the point that we basically have a lot of guardrails and we try to correct outputs to make sure that even smaller models can work. But you're still going to see a huge difference in performance between smaller models and big models. So if you want to get like great results with agents nowadays, you're still kind of locked into like the bigger models, like at least a GPT 3.5 kind of model. So I would say be on the like go into that with eyes wide open that you're going to be using GPT 3.5 level models or more, depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
So you're probably making a lot of the people who are hacking on Llama to run on Raspberry Pi and and smaller devices upset here. But uh, uh, in to be fair, I think Crew itself doesn't care what model you use or deploy. You're just this is more of a kind of your experience in terms of model quality and things. But if you're interested in using Crew to develop an agent that will operate on device offline, so to speak, that's certainly possible, right?
It is. It is.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, there are a few small models that work great. So OpenERMS 2.5 from Nose Research works amazingly well. Mixtro is also another one that has been working well. And even Llama 3 now has been giving good results as long as you prompt it right. So yeah, we're like there are models out there. There are like 7 billion parameters, those 12 billion parameters that you could use and they would work well. And you can run those on smaller like boards if you want to.
So in terms of the nature of the agents that people are building with Crew, I guess because of the word agent, am I right to assume that this is completely no human in the loop kind of applications?
It's up to you, actually. So, yeah, most of the use cases, there is no human in the loop, but we do offer human in the loop. So you can basically set one flag and you can say, hey, before this agent finishes its work, I want to make sure that it comes back and checks with me. And then it gives you the ability to intervene and kind of like give feedback on like what you think about their end result. So the model can then go back and reiterate on top of that.
I can see, Joe, when I'm building an agent, that my goal is some kind of internal task. So like you alluded to, right? So maybe I'm an analyst in Wall Street and I'm trying to kind of automate some of the things I do to in order to create a report and things like that. Um, to some extent, maybe I'm comfortable because basically once I automate, I can read the report and make edits, right? So, number one. So in some ways, it's an internal focus agent with some kind of human at the very last stage to kind of evaluate the quality. Now, when you get to like, so are you starting to see situations where these agents are more actually not focused on internal tasks, but externally facing agents? So I guess the classic example here from many, many years ago that people still use is the whole, can I book a complicated travel flight and travel trip? A kind of agent, right? So are you starting to see some of these more consumer focused, externally focused agents?
So I would say that because we're focused on enterprise and a lot of the companies that we're working with are kind of like big, like of like kind of Fortune 500 companies and like they usually leverage it more for internal processes. I would say there's 10% of the user facing use cases. And even those are not like a book your trip kind of things. They're more like for it's more like technical products. So one example, for example, is a user that is basically built with Crew, the ability for people to do experimentation with features. So let's say that you want a company, you're trying to introduce a new feature, you want to gain understanding about like, is this useful? It's not. This company allows you to give information about the feature that you're trying to build, and it will create 1,000 product managers and 1,000 users and get all them talking and interviewing each other, and then at the end compile a full report of everything that they learned about like this feature. So basically kind of like trying to automate feature testing without you having to actually talk with anyone, but doing everything through role playing and agents. That's kind of like a more user like end user use case that we have seen, but I would say the vast majority is internal use cases. Yeah, where basically people are getting promoted to be manager of agents now, and agents is just another tool on their toolbox.
So you mentioned earlier that agents plus RAG is quite a common scenario. So can you walk our listeners through why that might be?
Yeah, sure. Because honestly, a lot of the times you want your agents to get access to data, right? So we are working, for example, with a big like Fortune 500 company that is doing financial analysis. And when they're doing financial analysis, they want to look at public and closed documents. Public documents are going to probably the regular SEC stuff. So they're talking 10Ks, 10Qs, all that. Those are big documents. You don't want to ingest them as a whole. You want to make sure that you do rag over them. So that's like a classical example. Then also the same thing for internal documents, being able to like basically do rag over those internal documents. We ourselves internally are also doing that. For example, all the documentation for crewAI is actually written by a crew. We don't spend like any time writing docs nowadays. And the way that it does is by doing rag over the code and rag over the existing docs and finding like things that are missing and then updating the docs to include that. So you can see here two different examples on how rag is useful. But yeah, basically context windows are still like they're getting bigger and bigger, but the more you put content in there, usually the quality gets a little lower. So until we fix that, being able to do RAG is what allows you to get like high quality outputs while bringing the high quality inputs.
I imagine many of your enterprise customers also do uh, use agents against LLMs that have been fine-tuned, right?
I gotta say, it's not that common.
Oh, really?
We have, yeah, we have done it, but it's not that common. I think that because context windows are getting like higher and higher, what people are kind of like doubling down on is more providing examples, right? So kind of like a few shots prompts where you show like, hey,
Yep.
there's a few examples. Can you like make sure that you output that way? We have used it fine-tune models. We basically fine-tune, I think it was OpenERMs or Mistral 7B to sound like us. So it sounds like the company, right? And then you can basically have like a bunch of agents like plan a marketing material. And then at the end, you get that like AI sounding text, but then you pass it through this final agent, and this final agent basically is able to translate it into something that you would actually say because it was fine-tuned on your text.
That's interesting because I think to me, fine-tuning is largely a solved problem if you use a service like Anyscale, for example. It's so easy. You just need to have the fine-tuning data examples. Because if you do the few shot thing, it might be possible, but then you have cost and latency, you know? So
Right?
whereas if you just do kind of a fine-tuning thing, then you're done, right? So then you have a model that's fine-tuned, that's fast, it's cheap. All right. So now let me put you on the spot here. Let's say I'm giving you a keynote at a conference and I give you 3 slides, right? So in these 3 slides, you have to give me your 3 favorite examples of usage of Crew that is not from Crew itself.
All right.
So 3 examples, use cases, case studies of Crew, not from Crew itself. One is at least one of the 3 is multi-agent. Go.
All right. All of the 3 are multi-agents.
Okay.
First one is an odd one, manufacturing monitoring. So basically monitoring data coming out of manufacturing processes and machines, and then crossing that over with FDA guidelines and internal SOPs to make sure there is no deviations. And if it is, then an agent can do an investigation on what happened and put together a full report so that people can take action on that. Number 2, auditing, looking into crossing financial documents with external data in order to do auditing on a company. Number 3, lead scoring. So basically, as a lead comes in, doing a bunch of researching around this lead, understanding competitors, crossing that over with your ideal customer profile, crossing that over with your offerings, writing down talking points, an initial email, and then pinging the sales rep with all that information ready to go.
So, as you were talking through your examples, I the phrase that keeps coming to mind, that's an old phrase, and I assume you get asked this a lot. So, what's the difference between this and robotic process automation?
RPA. Honestly, people are talking a lot about that. This is
Yeah,
basically like, this is actually a great comparison. We
yeah,
talk about like, hey, this is like RPA 2.0.
right.
It's not that different at all. I think it's a great correlation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so then, so the 3 examples you gave seem like involve some sort of data gathering and then data fusion and then analyzing that data and then producing insight, right? So it's basically
Yes.
like an analyst automating an analyst somehow, right? So, which of those aspects would you say would benefit from further improvements from the LLM models themselves?
Mm. I think the final analysis. I think right now for you to get like great final analysis, there's a few different ways that you can do it. You can like prompt it very hard. You can give it like templates for it to follow, and you can even train the model to do it. But I think like the better those final analysis get, the better. And I think that's kind of the piece that I would like work the most. We're actually thinking a lot about this recently, like because what people want in the end of the day is they want a reliability in the terms of like repeatability. They want like they get very good results. They want to get very good results all the time, nonstop. So how do you allow them to do that with something that is fuzzy like a LLM? And we have been thinking a lot about that. And I think fine tuning might be one solution. And we're exploring that. We're exploring fine tuning our own models, for example. They're great at being agents. But we're also exploring this idea of automatically fine tuning. So if someone develops an agent with crewAI, they run it enough times, we allow the agents themselves to pick up the good examples, and then we can automatically fine tune the model for them. But there's like other ideas that we have been playing with because I think right now what would benefit agentic systems the most is consistency.
Yeah, and also, so do you folks worry about things like hallucination in the following sense, right? So, uh, because even in the case of Ragjo, so if you're not careful, right? So, uh, you develop a retrieval augmented generation system, um, and the LLM, will look at the search results and say, you know what, I have better information than that. Let me give you this answer, right? I mean, because the LLM also has some priors, right? So you have to put some guardrails in place. So what besides hallucination, so what are some of the more classic risks that you worry about in terms of agentic AI? I'm assuming, standard things like security and privacy, but what are some of the ones that are may not be obvious to people who aren't in the space?
Prompt injection is a big one, and I think not a lot of people think about that because you have these agents kind of interacting with like the outside world. So they're searching the internet, they're scraping websites, they've been looking at internal documents. If someone tries to do an injection in your prompt by basically like adding content in there that will steer the agent to do something else, to use a tool that it's not supposed to in a way that's not supposed to, or to kind of like change the information or change the final result, I think that's something that like it's a new problem. We didn't used to have it in the past. So I don't think there's a lot of people thinking about that. I worry less about hallucinations because we did have seen people get some success at working around it with like asking for reference so they can double check and all that. So I worry less about that. I do worry about prompting injection a little more though.
So prompt injection, you come from Ruby on Rails, you had SQL injection. So what are some of the lessons from web security that you can apply to this setting? So yeah, so prompt injection, you come from Ruby on Rails, web security, SQL injection. Are there any lessons from your previous life that you can apply to this world? Because prompt injection is uh, it's something that a lot of people worry about, and there's no clear answers, right?
Yeah, and honestly, that's all that I have. I have questions
Yeah.
because if you look at like injections in the past, like SQL injections, right? Those are clear to ask because it's a very like specific format that you follow the plugin and whatnot. And then a bunch of libraries that were created on top of that just to make it easy for you to kind of like filter those out. And with prompting, because it's kind of like fuzzy inputs, you don't really have a specific format. So you don't really know like what to watch for. So yeah, I think in the end of the day, it's gonna come a lot to like maybe the hypothesis here there is that you get like signature from sources, so you can like get the source verify the content is original and it hasn't been updated, and then as long as the source that you're getting the content for can vouch for it, then you trust it. um so maybe that's the way to go, but I think it's a problem that we don't have that often just because there's not a lot of people doing this.
but I think it's going to become an increasing problem for sure.
The nice thing about this space is the researchers also seem to be becoming more interested in this space. So, for example, I don't know if you're aware, there's a benchmark called Agent Bench that people in the research community have put forward. So, is there anything in the research world that you think that you yourself are excited about that might impact what you folks do?
100%. A lot of like our initial like hypothesis around crewAI came from research papers. So when I created crewAI, I was trying to find the tool for me to build more agents because I had built a few and I was loving it. They're working so great. And then I looked around at the tools that were around, and none of them kind of like fit my use case. But then I saw ChatDav, and there was a whole paper on ChatDav, and I was amazed by it. I was amazed about the rolling playing aspect of that and how well that made it work, and the results that they're getting on building software using that. So that, for example, was a huge inspiration to crewAI, where now on crewAI, every agent is role playing. You gotta give it a role, you gotta give it a go, you gotta give it a backstory. That's kind of mandatory now. So we're definitely like watching for like as papers come out to make sure that we adapt and bring some of that into like crewAI as well. Because as you said, it's funny how usually like hardcore ML research and software engineering kind of like were apart. There was this big wall between them. They never really talked to each other. And with LLMs, we kind of finally found that common point where both groups are coming together. And I think there's something beautiful that's coming out of that because like people are now they're closer to end users, they're closer to kind of like impact that they're having, and people are just getting more interested. And the feedback cycle is being faster. So that I think that's just going to keep getting more interesting and interesting.
So, in closing, Crew AI itself, the open source project, and also, I guess, the enterprise edition, give us a little hint into the near-term roadmap. We're talking 6 to 12 months. What can users and developers expect?
Yes. So the next 6 to 12 months, you're going to have a UI, so you can build crews with no code. You're going to be able to deploy these agents into production within minutes. That's already possible using crewAI Plus. You're going to be able to fine tune automatically your agents if they perform well or not. You're going to be able to train your agents before they execute. You're going to be able to easily connect those crews with external sources, things like CRMs and marketing marketplaces and all that. And you're going to have a huge influx of templates that you're going to be able to use with crewAI that are going to be pretty easy to roll up with. So those are some of the things that are on our radar. There's more things than the radar, but then like it's more guessing than anything. The market's moving so fast it's kind of like hard to keep up. So honestly, we keep like um, you got to keep your eyes on the ball, right? So you move a couple weeks and then you reassess. You look at the market is going, you look at how the wind is blowing, and then I'm like, all right, let's just shift 5 degrees that direction, and then you kind of move a little bit. So I think a lot of like doing and running an AI business right now is being able to be fast and also reactive. So that's a lot of what we have been doing, and we take a lot of pride on that and how fast we have been.
But the good thing for listeners who are building AI agents is that with Crew, actually, you can benefit from a lot of the progress in foundation models and whatever Crew app you have built or Crew agent you have built. You can just swap the new models. I mean, it's that easy. And so, one thing you did not mention in your roadmap, though, which I was paying attention to, is multimodality.
Yes. Multimodality is more close term. You're honestly trying to get that out there the sooner the better. But you're right. So a few information that I think might be important for the people listening is one, we're not going away. We're a little shy and we don't public tell a bunch of people, but we actually a fully fledged company now. We have raised money, so we have a few $1 million in the bank, and we have people in London and Brazil and the US. So it's not like we're going anywhere anytime soon. If anything, things are just going to get faster and faster from here on. So if you're being on Crew, yes, you're going to keep being able to build on Crew. If anything, you're going to have a bigger community, more support, more templates, and more features coming down the pipe.
And with that, thank you, Joe.